Welcome to the Miami FC Broadcast Network. My name is Kartik Krishnaiyer alongside Coach Paul Dalglish. Today we're going to talk a little bit about youth development, Coach, and in fact the Miami FC Youth Soccer Academy is hosting a free open tryout next week, Wednesday and Thursday, May 29th and May 30th at Tamiami Park. We had over 500 for our tryouts a couple weeks ago. The U8 to U13 tryout will be from 5:30 to 7 p.m. and the U14 to U18 tryout will be from 7 to 9 p.m. Both those days. All players must register in advance at miamifc.com/open-tryout to register. Coach, this is a big topic. You have an expertise in it. With the U.S. not qualifying for the last World Cup, it seems we're having more conversations than ever about player development, youth development, the academy system, how we teach our kids, what we're teaching them at a young age in the sport of football.
Yeah, I think perception lags behind reality in a lot of occasions. With youth development, you can't just come in and expect to see results quickly. Because if you think players start developing at 6, 7 years of age, by the time you actually see results of that at international competitions, whether it be U17, the Olympics, the U20s are starting their qualifying tournament tomorrow, or the first team level, it takes time. So the thing about youth development is it's if you just continually change the coaches or you change the ideas for 14, 15, 16-year-olds, then it's just like cutting off the branch of a tree. They're going to grow back. So I think the US has made some great strides in recent years in developing the root of the problem, but it's going to take time for those changes to bear fruits. And I think it's going to be if you look at the U20 roster that's playing tomorrow, there's a lot of players that are playing in Europe on that roster. I think the US have taken the tournament very, very seriously by calling up some of the players that they've called up. So they've called up Weah, McKinney. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they get on, and it's going to be a great reference point for us to see really how far these players have come in this new generation of American players.
Yeah, that match will actually kick off exactly a day from when we're doing this, Friday, tomorrow at about 2:30 Eastern time. And the U.S., there are high expectations around this team. Yeah. But what we've seen historically, Coach, is that the U.S. tends to perform better at the U20 level than at the senior level, or at the U17 level than the senior level. Is there something fundamentally we're not doing at that between the ages of 17 and 23?
So I think you've got to go back a lot of steps first. It's not really what is being done at that age group, really. I think with youth development, you've got to decide what you want eventually. So say obviously if we are in a professional academy, we're starting our youth program. There's still some details to be finalised, but we're hoping that happens. And if we decide that our long-term goal is to develop a player for the first team, then we've got to work backwards. And the way that development works is by chunking. So what you've got to do, if you try and teach a 6, 7-year-old player what they need to learn to be a professional player when they get to the first team level at 6 or 7, they won't understand it. So what you've got to do is you've got to break down the components of a professional soccer player into individual parts. So, the age groups that I normally look at is before 6, and before 6, it's just about kids playing and really falling in love with the game. Then between 6 and 8, it's small-sided games, always kind of making kids make decisions. 9 to 11 is going to a maximum of 4 versus 4, because that's the lowest amount of players that you can have all the directions in football. So if you're playing a diamond, you can have forward, left, right, centre, and back. And then when you get to 12, 14, the introduction to 11v11, and that's the only time that you should really start introducing team tactics. Any team tactics before that is too complex for players. And if you are spending time working on team tactics, then you're going to miss out on some of the key attributes that allow you to implement tactics when the players are at the relevant age. And then when the kids get to 15, U15 really, that's when you really start tactical training. That's when you need to start doing movement patterns on a daily basis to ingrain the system of play that you want them to play if you are following team development curriculum. So I think that the US's responsibility is not to develop players. The US's responsibility is to create an environment where players can be developed by other clubs within their system. And then when the players get to the relevant age groups, they should then put the players into the teams that have developed the best from their system. And so I think that what, rather than looking at what the US needs to do at kind of U17 level or between U17 and U21, we've got to look at what tools the players have when they get to that age. Because if you think there's no residency program anymore, so without a residency program, the US national team players on the men's side they're only in camp for how many days a year? So how much influence can you really have on the players?
Yeah, at the national team level, you
can't place importance on what they do with the national team. You've got to provide the tools you've got to provide the environment so that the clubs can develop the players to then benefit the national team. And by environment, what I talk about is environment is conditions. So it's no surprise that where's the best climate in America?
Florida.
California.
California. Okay.
California. Florida's too hot at times to play soccer. Whereas California, you've got 12 months of the year weather. The most amount of players that are going to the U20 World Cup from any state in America is from California. There's 5. So if you look at that, so the conditions are one thing that you need. You've got to create conditions that are conducive to developing soccer players. So if you look at California, the conditions are good. Then you've got to look at environment is also the quality of the field, the quality of your coaching, the quality of your teammate, and the quality of your opposition. So only when you have all those factors do you then have the ability to have the correct environment to create a soccer play.
So you would you talk about small-sided games. That also involves narrowing pitch size, right? When players are younger, don't throw them out on full-size pitches.
Well, I think that the US made a change a couple of years ago when it used to be you go straight from 8v8 to 11v11, and they've made the change so you now go 7v7, 9v9, 11v11. So the changes have been made. The problem that we have in America is that in a lot of cases, not all cases, the 11v11 fields aren't the relevant size for 11v11 at that age group. So sometimes you can go and see U12, U13 players playing on a men's pitch, and that's part of the environment as well. And for me, that would be one of the focuses of investment for me if I was with US Soccer, would be to invest in the environment that is conducive to creating soccer players.
Implementing a common style, you mentioned that earlier. The residency program being gone, does that now leave that to the clubs as well?
See, this is one of the biggest debates in that you'll have if you get into a debate about youth development with people involved in it, is a common style. Is your role as an academy to develop an individual or to develop a role player for your system? And what I would say is, if you're at Barcelona, you're at Liverpool, you're at Real Madrid, Manchester United, your job is to develop a player for your first team. And there's an economic aspect to it as well. So what you've got to say is the academy a cost-effective way of producing players for our first team that is cheaper than going out and buying a player from the open market? So what you would hope is, as an elite academy, is that you develop the individual, but you develop the individual that's relevant for your system. Now, the problem that I think that is the right thing for a Barcelona, a Manchester United, a Liverpool, a Real Madrid to do. However, if you're in charge of an independent youth program, and you don't have a professional team at the top of it, then your kids, you're trying to develop players for going to college or going to somebody else's professional team. So therefore, my belief is it is more beneficial for the kids to develop them as an individual within a team framework rather than develop them into a good team. And individual development training would be more beneficial. So I don't think there's a right way and a wrong way. I just believe that what you have to do is you have to have your culture and your plan that allows you to provide the best opportunities for your players when they leave you. And that's when you've got to get your kicks if you work in youth football, is what do your kids do after they've left you? It's not what your kids do when they're with you. Because ultimately youth trophies don't matter.
Right.
It's only what they do when they get to the professional level. So when I was working in youth, I judge how good I was by what the players do after they've left me, not by what they did when they were with me.
Coach, you talked a little bit about speed of decision making, and this is something we hear American players criticized for, and how they're taught that when they learn comfortable decision making skills when on the ball, and then how they apply that as they get into those older age groups. Speak a little bit about that.
So, what we do in and listen, there's no absolutes in youth development. Youth development is, you can't put everybody in one basket. So we can't say that this is what we do in America, or this is what they do in Brazil, or this is what they do in England. There is people doing good things in America, there's people doing bad things in America. So rather than talk about what is going on in America, I can talk about what is conducive to good development and what is not conducive to good development. So, and if that's happening in America, then people can plug themselves into whichever category that they want to be in. So if you go and take your coaching badges, or you go and you read about football, in most cases they talk about technical, tactical, physical and psychological. Now, that is okay if you're a coach, right? And you're talking about football and you can interpret that in whichever way you want. When you're dealing with youth players, then you need a more easy to understand common language, if you like. So Raymond Verheijen's he's a person that's I've got respect for his ideas on football, and what he says is that the physical, technical, psychological is and etc. is dated, and what he says is the most important thing in football is awareness, because before you can do anything on a football pitch, you have to see what your options are. Once you've seen what your options are, you then need to decide based upon what your options are. So that's decision making, which is the second most important thing in football. After that, you then need technique to be able to implement what you've seen and decided to do. And then after that, you need fitness to repeat that for the duration of a game. So if you're playing at U14 and you're playing 80-minute games, then you need to be able to repeat those actions for 80 minutes. I think there's a simpler way of describing it. I think it's as simple as look, decide, action, so implement, and then repeat. So I think that if you can simplify that even simpler for young players to understand, and if it's as simple as look, decide, implement, repeat, then that is what a football action is. And basically, if you are teaching implementation, which is technique, right, without decision making and awareness, which is look and decide, then you aren't teaching game relevant technique. So you can go and you can find somebody in the street who can do all these skills. They can do anything with a soccer ball independently when them by themselves. But when you put them into a team environment, all of a sudden they can't make the decisions. They don't have the awareness to see the decisions they need to make. They might have the technique to implement the action, but they don't have the two things that are more important that come before the action. So for me, one of the mistakes that I've seen in youth development, and I'm not saying that this is what we do in America, as I said there, that this is what I have seen as a mistake, is we teach technique implementation in isolation of decision making and awareness. So we'll do a finishing drill where it'll go to a coach, it'll come back, they'll shoot and they'll score, but it's not relevant to the game, because in a game there's pressure. Yeah. In a game, you've got to do something before you get that chance.
You don't have that time and space on the ball.
And that's in passing. Every time you make a pass, you've got to have received the ball before you make a pass. Yeah. So if you do a repetitive passing drill with no awareness, no decision making, it's not teaching football. It's a warm-up drill to get ready to play football. So it's about simplifying it back. The more I've learned about football and the more I've kind of studied about development and the way people learn, the simpler that your ideas seem. Now, there might be a lot of science behind it, there might be a lot of thought behind it, but the key to being a good teacher is making it simple for the people that you are teaching to understand. And that is what we've got to do with football. The game is the best teacher, but what you've got to do to be a good coach is you've got to manipulate the game so that the decisions that you want to be made come out. And then after you, and what the other thing that you've got to be is you've got to be patient. You know, if you think about working with children and youth players and teenagers and then even young professionals, they are going to fail more than the people that you see on the TV. So you can't expect them to do what they do, what that you see people doing on the TV. You've got to allow them to fail. And what I've seen in America, because of the system, in some cases, and I know the US Academy, there's no qualification for it. There's no that you can be, if your performances aren't good enough, you can be eliminated from the US Academy. Yeah. But there's no real promotional relegation into it. So that protects it a little bit. But what you see in the system in America, because you have all the, in Texas it was the Premier League, the State Classic League, Division 1, Division 2, Super 2, Division 2. Because you have all these leagues and you have relegation and promotion in the younger age groups, you need to win. So what coaches do is and here's the thing that happens, and people that are listening to this that work in youth soccer will understand what I'm saying, because I've been there, is you're under pressure from the parents and from the club to qualify for a certain level so that you retain the players, so that that team stays together. Because if you think if a club is receiving $2,000 per kid and it's 18 players on a team, that's $36,000 that the club, that goes to paying for lights, that goes to paying for coaches, that goes to paying for field maintenance.
That's your operating expense for a year.
And you think, so if that team doesn't qualify for the State Classic, and then 5 of your players decide that they're going to leave and go to a team that, and this just happens at 12, 13, 14, then 5 of your players decide that they're going to leave and go to play on a team that has qualified for the State Classic League. Because there is a rule that to keep your status, that you need to keep core plus 1. So if there's 18 players on the team, you would only need to retain 50% plus 1, which is 10 players, to be able to keep that status. So the players that have got you at that level, you can replace 8 of them. So what will happen is the players that have got the team to that level sometimes will get pushed onto a second team. The players from other clubs will want to play in that level, they'll then go to that team, and then that team might fold. So now the coach's employment might be dependent on that team coming back.
And do you have a lot of kids that burn out and quit then at that age?
Well, I think what we do is because of structure, what we do is we create the American system outside of the US Academy system, creates a fear of failure. So there is, so what a fear of failure does, it makes coaches be risk, and it might be coming more from the coaching staff and the clubs rather than the players.
Yeah.
Because it takes a confident coach to say, hey, I'm not bothered about playing at that level. You've got to believe in me, this is better for the kids long term. But the problem is, when the leagues separate, if you've got D2, Super 2, D1, State Classic, and the Premier League, that's 5 levels. So if you start at 13 and you're a new team, you can only get to the Premier League even if you win every year. If you start, does it say U13?
Yeah.
Yeah, by U18?
By U18, yeah.
And then college just start recruiting, which is a lot of the intention for players playing soccer and playing select soccer.
And for parents paying for...
Starts at U16, U17. So the system, not for the 1% that play in the Academy League, but the system for the players that play in the rest of the leagues, it makes it very, very difficult for coaches to do the right thing and for clubs to do the right thing, which creates a fear of failure, so the coach plays a way that is risk adverse and takes the decisions away from the players, and then the players don't get the chance to make decisions.
So they become very robotic as a result.
Correct. And the easiest way that I can explain it is I have GPS navigation on my car. So when I was coming here, I would put the address into the office. I've left from wherever I've left from, and the GPS will bring me here. I'll get every decision right on the way here, and I will get here without thinking. I will get here traffic. I'll take the right exit on the freeway. I'll take the right turnings, and I'll get here. Now, if you took me back to where I started, I would have no idea how to get back here. Whereas if back in the old days when you had a map, an A to Z in the back of your car, and you had a pencil, you'd have to stop and you'd roll your window down and you'd ask people. Yeah. Now, it might take you longer to get there that first time, maybe even the second time, but then you'd remember how to get there for the rest of your life. And I think the saying is, you give a man a fish, he can feed himself for a day. You teach a man how to fish, he can feed himself for the rest of his life. And what I think with the pay-to-play model in America and the influence of coaches, we give out too many fishes. We don't teach enough people to fish.
Coach, what age group would be the right age group to start emphasizing results? Because what you're saying today, I've heard from numerous youth coaches about, well, we emphasize results at the U13 level, at the U11 level, and things go haywire, and players quit, and there's a lot of pressure on the clubs to achieve promotion, and it creates this robotic nature you talk about. So when is the right time to do it?
I don't think it should be. I don't see a problem with wanting to win. I think that the will to win is one of the most important attributes that you can have as a player. I think the problem is the problems that you face yourself if you don't win, as a club and as a player. Because if you don't qualify for the level, then it's very, very difficult, just because every year there's relegation and promotion, to get to that level where you need to be without leaving your team and going to another team. So winning is not an issue. I think that part of development is learning to win. I mean, to win, you need to, this is the bit that they don't teach you in coaching courses, or they don't talk about in academies. Having that desire to run till your lungs burn, having that will to win in a game, having that desire, to push through when that little voice in your head's telling you to quit. That's the kids that are going to make it. It's not the kids that can do step overs or can do Cruyff turns. It's the kids that want to push themselves to the limit. And that, for me, is the will to win. And it's the will to win the battle against yourself. more than the will to. And a byproduct is that if you have enough players on your team that have the will to win the battle against themselves, then the team's going to win. And so I'm not into that, the whole winning thing. It's more the fear of failure that I think is the problem.
How much of that fear of failure is down to parental expectations? How much of it is down to the academies and the coaches?
Well, the fear of failure comes from parents as well, and it comes from coaches, because my son's playing. He's playing in a local team at this moment in time, and I was at a tournament on Sunday at the Dolphins training facility, and it was indoor. It was on turf, and there was a little kid started crying, and as he walked off the pitch, because the coach had shouted something at him, and I was watching and I was taking interest. The coach shouted the kid to get into a position, and the kid threw his arms up in the air, walked off the pitch while the game was going on, and sat with his mum. And the mum was annoyed with the kid for doing that. And later on, I was walking past, and I heard a mum say to a kid, "I'm not going to bring you back."
Another mom.
Yeah, well, yeah. So and I'm thinking to myself, that takes the fun away from football, and that puts pressure on a child that isn't fair. And the easiest way I can explain it is if I was to ask you what the kids like doing today more than anything else, would you say if you gave a kid some spare time, what are they going to do, and what do you have to stop them from doing as a parent?
I think one of the things they're doing is playing video games.
Okay, so if you've got video games, my kids, we have to ration the iPads because they want to go and play on their iPads. And here's, take FIFA for example, right? So if I now take that situation on Sunday and I make that a video game, right? Because there's no pressure of expectation on a kid when they're playing video games from parents or coaches. The kids get really, really competitive in video games, right? And they shout at the TV, but they still want to play the next day even if they lose, right? Now, if I was to take that example from Sunday and I put that into FIFA, and you can imagine that I'm now the parent and my son is playing FIFA, and I say to him, first and foremost, there's a coach shouting at him while he's playing FIFA, "Why didn't you pass the ball? You need to get further left when you're playing this." And he's going, "But I like dribbling." My son does a thing in FIFA at the moment where I don't know how he does it, it annoys me. It really annoys me, right? Because he does things that I don't know how to do, because he learns. But he flicks the ball up and he juggles it all the way along the pitch, and I can't tackle him. It really annoys me, but he loves that. Now, if he did that in a game of football, right, and that's what he loves doing, and that's the whole point of him playing video games. If he was to do that in a game of football, then there'd be a coach saying, "Don't do that." There'd be other parents saying, "You've got to pass the ball to my kid," right? And you take the fun away, right? So if you imagine you had a video game, and the kids were playing video games, and the parents were lined up on the side of the bedroom, right? And they're watching the kids playing video games, and then the coach is on the other side, and he's saying, "Right, don't juggle the ball, don't shoot from that far away. You've got to combine more. You don't play 1v1." And then when they didn't do that, what the coach was saying, the parents are going, "I'm not bringing you back." Are kids going to enjoy playing video games as much?
No.
Well, that's what we do in soccer. And for me, the way that children are amazing if you let them be amazing. When you put shackles on them, then they don't have the maturity to have the confidence to defy orders. And one of the other things that we say in America, everyone's crying out saying, "Oh, there's not as many leaders in football anymore." I mean, if you go through football and you go, "Okay, who's a leader? Who's a real leader in football?" The reason for that is because as adults we don't allow kids to lead. We lead for them.
Yeah. And
for me, it's about making soccer fun again. Allow them to make decisions. Allow them and encourage them to fail, as long as you have a solution for it, and you have a plan, and then you can guide them into the answer. Because I do think that there's a big problem in any kind of, not just soccer, in any kind of youth development of anything, that we don't allow kids to fail, and we try and influence them rather than support them on their journey.
You came through the Liverpool youth system and played for Newcastle, played with Alan Shearer, among others, at Newcastle. The English made several changes to their youth development structure after the period you came through Liverpool's system. How many of those changes are things you would like to see implemented here?
So a good friend of mine, Steve Cooper, is the U17 England coach. So he just won the World Cup with England. So we share a lot of similar ideas. We've spent hours and hours and hours discussing youth football, and he's a big part of the changes that were implemented in the England setup. So I'm quite aware of the changes that the English setup have made, and I think you're seeing England won the U17 and the U20 World Cup. They didn't do as well in the Euros just then in the 17s, but a lot of the players weren't released by the clubs, and that's a thing that you face in football as well. Do you always have your strongest roster going into these tournaments?
Particularly when they're not over the summer, right?
I think that you can't come to like, I know on the first team level that Greg Berhalter has gone and spoke to a lot of the players, a lot of people in positions in different federations about what you can do to help the US soccer system. And that works for the first team. The difference is you've got to remember that England is a totally different environment to the United States of America. The environment in the United States of America is that a lot of the states are bigger than England.
Yeah.
So to get the states are so less densely populated that when I was younger and I was at Liverpool, the longest I travelled for a game was 20 minutes for a game. And every town had enough kids in it to put a competitive team together. And then what you would do is you would then get the best players from all over Liverpool that would then go and play once, twice a week at Liverpool. So all the best kids would just go and train. We didn't play games at Liverpool at a young age. All we do is train twice a week, and there was no real coaching. It was just playing in indoor gyms. It was playing outside. It was just repetitive, high quality training against the best. And if you look during that time, Robbie Fowler, Steve McManaman, Jamie Carragher, David Thompson went on to play. Steven Gerrard came through that way. Michael Owen came through that way. Yeah. And if you look, Dominic Matteo came through that way. And if you look at the period of players that came through before the academy started at Liverpool, when the players had to stop playing for the schools and the club teams, and then they had to go full time with the academy, and then you look at the players that came through the 10 years after. It is basically, you can do a micro sample of Liverpool Football Club and look at what's happening in America. Now, I've seen England change to place more importance on decision making in football rather than instruction following. And you're starting to see a lot of creative players come through in England now.
But Liverpool, as an example, the 10 years after Carragher, Michael Owen, and Steven Gerrard come out of that academy, you have
not anybody
players of that caliber.
Of their level. You do have a few, but you don't have players of
then
that
you
level.
Make these changes that you're talking about, and now you've got the Trent Alexander-Arnolds of the world and players of that caliber coming out of the academy. And we're seeing this even with the other academies in England, Everton, Manchester City, Manchester United, higher level players than they've had. So are there specific things in that DNA that the US should replicate?
So I think, as I say, I keep going back to an environment, because you can't train a player in a vacuum. So to become a master of something, whether it's soccer, whether it's something else, at some point in your life, there needs to be an ignition point. And an ignition point is something that motivates you to make the choice to get better at football or whatever it is that you want to do over quitting and deciding to play video games, or decide to go and chase girls, or to decide to go and get into music, or go back and concentrate on your studies. And the ignition point can be anything. The ignition point can be somebody told you when you were 11 that you were too small and you were never going to make it, which you hear all the time.
Yeah.
And the ignition point can be that you went to a soccer game with your dad when you were 7 and you saw a great player play, and now you want to emulate that great player. It doesn't really matter what your ignition point is, but if you think about how many people actually play in the Premier League, there's compared to there's how many, is it 7 billion people in the world, is it? Something like that? And how many people actually play in the Premier League? The chances and how many kids growing up wanting to be a footballer or playing football at a young age, if you actually start trying to get your head around what the failure rate is, you need to be a pretty special person to be able to have said that you've played in the Premier League.
For those out there at any given time, for those who may not know, there are only 500 players who can call themselves at any given time a Premier League player.
Right. So
that's
you
a
think
small number.
Out of, is it 6 or 7 billion?
Yeah, 7 billion now.
7 billion.
500
right?
guys.
500 out of 7 billion. So there needs to be something, an inner drive inside of you, and that's what I'm saying, like the will to win the battle against yourself is the most important thing in football. And to have that, I think the most important thing is to have that ignition point, because most people are going to fail. And it's not about who's the best at 11, 12, 13, 14, because it can actually be detrimental to be the best at that age.
Yeah.
Because it can create complacency. If it's easy for you at that age, then it can create complacency. It's actually better to be the small kid that is having to fight to survive, to play with maybe the more developed kids, because you're developing things that are going to stand you in good stead for the length of your career. Whereas, and if you can stick with that, then you've obviously had an ignition point somewhere that motivates you to keep going. And football, when I go back to the environment, I think that the advantage that Europe has over America at this moment in time is they have more natural ignition points. So more kids go to the game with the dad. More football's forced down your throat more on TV.
Yeah.
There's more social pressure in school to be good at football. There's not as much competition for football. There's not as much competition for football in England, whereas here you've got American football, basketball, baseball, you've got everything.
Yeah.
And the other thing that people in general don't take the academics as seriously in England as they do in America. So there's much more pressure here to spend time on academics as well. So the environment in America is more, I would say, the soccer environment at this age isn't that if I don't make it at soccer, I'm going to be getting a job at McDonald's because I don't have a college education or I've not finished high school. So for instance, I turned pro at 17, I didn't finish high school. So I knew that if I didn't make it as a football player, I didn't have any qualifications to go and use an education to get a job in a different area. So I was either going to go into coaching or go into agency or something like that where you didn't need qualifications to apply for a job. Whereas I do think that there isn't that pressure to succeed in America that there is in Europe. I think if you think of most basketball players, and I don't want to say most, I don't know the exact numbers, but a lot of them come from inner cities where they come, it's not a structured environment that they learn to play basketball in. It might be street basketball, or it might be playing, with the friends, where they learn how to make decisions. They don't play basketball with the fear of failure until they get into a structured environment when they get older. And also, I don't want to speak for people, but it might be that they see that as a way of providing for not just themselves but for the family. And I think soccer has that same kind of mentality in Europe. And I actually put something out to a couple of players that I knew during my time in Austin. I still try and keep in touch with them as well. One is Jack Imperato, who's playing at Villarreal. Julian Gaines, who's at Austin Bode. They're both 02 birth years. And they both said that the difference between Europe and America is the intensity that kind of the pressurized situation that makes you have to succeed, that makes you have to try and push yourself to the limit to succeed. The competitiveness of the environment is what drives the players to that elite level.
Let me ask you about players who bloom later, because we've had a number of guys we've hyped in the United States. You can go through the list: the Freddie Adus, Santino Quarantas, Bobby Conveys, who haven't turned into the players maybe we quite expected. Yeah. Then you have a guy you played with, Chris Wondolowski, just became the all-time leading goal scorer in Major League Soccer. Wasn't really a starter for a professional team till he was 27, 28.
But so. Wando I played with, as you said. I actually went to DC United when Bobby Convey was there and Santino Quaranta. So I've seen them play. I've played with them. Played with all three.
Played with all three of them.
And all of them were good players. The difference, as I go back to it, with Wando had a desire to push himself every day. And listen, people say that he didn't play. He should have played. There was senior players there. He was a rookie or young player without much hype coming out. Yeah. But the senior players in the team knew Wando was good. I mean, I'd been a winger most of my career. I came to Houston and I played as a striker. And I'm looking at this guy playing in the reserves. And he was hungry every single day. Every single day he'd work on his finishing. He pushed himself to the limit. He came in every day in a good mood, never got disheartened that he wasn't playing. And I knew he was going to make it. I knew he was going to make it. I could tell he was going to make it back then because you could just see it in him. And at the time there was me, Brian Ching, Dwayne De Rosario would play up front sometimes. There was Alejandro Moreno. Yeah. So there was experienced players. That was the only reason Wando didn't play. It was nothing to do with the level of his play. It was just there was a pecking order. But we knew that he was going to be good, and it was no surprise that he went back to San Jose where he came from, because other people knew from what he'd done in the reserves how good he was. But the reason he made it, and I don't want to say that this is the reason why the other two didn't have the careers that they were hyped up to have. Yeah. But I can only speak for Wando. He had an unbelievable appetite to be successful, that will to win. So, do we put too much pressure by hyping some of these guys in the U.S.? Because I mentioned Convey, Quaranta, etc. We've done a lot of that. Well, you can't hype a player. It's all relevant to the level, right? Yep. So, if you hype a player in MLS, how do you know how he compares to a player that's playing in Europe? Yeah. So the hype's real about Christian Pulisic. Yeah. I mean, that hype's real. McKinney, the hype's real. These kids are doing it in the Bundesliga, in Europe. These kids are the real deal, and they deserve the hype. Now, the one thing that we've got to do is we've got to not overhype them and allow them. Well, or maybe not. Maybe overhyping them isn't the right word. Maybe we've got to expect that it's not going to be a straight rise to where they need to get to. It's going to be more of a roller coaster ride, but as long as they're going in the upwards trajectory, then we've got to support them through it. As a young player, there's going to be dips in form, there's going to be peaks in form, and they don't become the best player in the world when they have a good game. They don't become the worst player in the world when they have a bad game. You've got to keep perspective of what they are, but they are the real deal, the measuring stick of the level they're playing at. allows you to say that those two are the real deal.
Coach, we're here at Miami FC trying to build a vertical pyramid and integrate the academy, the youth system, what we talked about at the beginning of the show, and connect it to our professional club. Is that the path forward, or is there no one-size-fits-all formula for a lot of these youth clubs you talk about and that you've worked with in Texas, seen in Texas, they're independent clubs, and they go to a certain age and that's it?
So I think in America it's different, because the goal of an academy, of a professional team in England, is to only produce a player for the first team. That's the goal. Here, because the youth programs are all-encompassing, really, you have players of so many different levels that you basically need to have 3 or 4 different programs inside the one program, all under the one umbrella. So what I learned fairly quickly, I came from a European background, started working in youth football here, and I had all these ideas from professional academies in England. And what I realized was that what I knew was, or what I thought was the way to develop players, was totally irrelevant to 95% of the players that were in the academy. What I had to do was I had to basically learn, okay, this is what we can do with this level of player, this is what we can do with this level of player, and this is what we can do with this level of player. And no level of player in America is more or less important. I mean, I think last time I looked, there was 2.5 million registered on the boys' side. It's the most amount of players anywhere in the world that are registered to play youth football, is the boys' side in America. But the difference here is that just because it's structured doesn't mean it's elite.
Yeah.
Whereas in England, those players that are maybe at a similar level wouldn't be in a pay-to-play system. They would just arrange to play by themselves,
right,
without a coach, and that would be the difference between America and England, is that in America, because a lot of these soccer players are first generation soccer players, yeah, and soon that will change to second generation, third generation soccer players. The parents think that what they have to do is drop the kids off at a club, and that's the way they play soccer. But in a lot of occasions, with all due respect, it is organised babysitting.
Yeah.
You know, at a lot of levels, and that's fine. But what you've got to do is, you can't have a professional curriculum with that level of player. You've got to have a fun-based curriculum that makes them want to come back and provide that service, and you've got to provide the relevant service for the relevant level of play.
We're running out of time, Coach, but I want to ask you, following up on that, are we neutering the creativity out of a lot of our players with the structure?
As I said, the fear of failure, the pressure from parents, the structure, it doesn't help, for sure, Kartik. And for me, it's more, there's a saying, why is the master the master and the student the student? It's because the master has failed more times than the student has tried. So for me, I think that the pay-to-play model, the structured model, is fine, right? And I think it's really important to the football culture in America, and there's a lot of people doing a great job. But what we've got to do is allow the kids to fail, make a creative environment, not a structured environment, and then that's when we will see the base of the pyramid grow, and then the top of the pyramid will be a lot shinier.
Great. We have several questions from fans out there. Juan, via Facebook Messenger, asks, Coach, what suggestions would you have for someone like me who coaches rec soccer at the U8 level but wants to grow as a coach and learn new strategies and skills?
I think the two of them are in isolation. The problem that he would have is if he tries to evolve as a coach through these 8-year-old recreational players. I think what he's got to do, he's got to be on two journeys. He's got to provide the relevant information for those 8-year-old rec kids, and make it as fun a learning environment as possible, and inspire them to want to get better. Whereas if he wants to develop as a coach, then he's got to go outside of that and learn what it would take to be the coach of an 8-year-old select team and work out what his coaching methodology would be if he was with them. Because the one thing that you can't do in soccer, and this is the mistake, a lot of people look at Barcelona that are working in America, and there's very, very few youth teams in America that can follow a Barcelona curriculum. And you see all these European powerhouses come into America and they go, oh, we're going to use this curriculum. It's irrelevant to 99% of the teams that are in it. So it's more about, in football, if you don't put a university teacher in charge of kindergarten kids, you put a kindergarten expert in charge of kindergarten kids. You don't put a kindergarten in charge of university kids. So you've got to make sure that your coaching terminology, your coaching, what you are, the information you're giving to the players is of the relevant level. I think, and that would be my advice to him. The one thing I was going to say is that there is a learning sweet spot. So if you under-challenge, so say you were doing recreational coaching with a select team, then you will under-challenge, you'll create complacency or boredom, and then the players will end up probably not playing soccer. You can over-challenge them, give a select methodology to recreational kids, you'll create anxiety, a fear of failure, and they'll quit soccer as well. So it's about finding that learning sweet spot for the players and then allowing them to grow.
In your experience, have there been players that are rec players who want to play? So
here's the problem. This is one of the biggest problems I've seen is a lot of times there are rec players on the same team as select players. Yeah. And what you see in youth football is that there's one star player on a team that creates a false sense of reality for the rest of the players on the team. Because the team wins, because this one player is better than everybody else, then the other players think that they're at the same level as this kid, or they should be playing at the same level. And what it does, it's not good for the kid that is the star, because creating complacency, and it's not good for the kids that are getting a false sense of reality, because they're not living in the real world either. So it's about getting the relevant level of players playing against the relevant level of players that push themselves into that learning sweet spot.
Alex via Twitter asks,
and by the way, I'm not. I know you don't like these things going long, but I'm not in any rush to go anywhere.
Well, so great. We have a few questions. So we're going to be here for a little while. Alex via Twitter says, what kind of fitness and nutrition tips do you have for kids when they aren't at practice or at games? So important.
Fitness. What age? Did they mention an age?
No, but let's start with U8.
I don't believe in fitness in isolation of the ball. So the way football's gone now is that we don't do anything here with the first team that doesn't involve the ball. So when we do football fitness, if we do sprints in football, we want to work on sprint training, we'll do 1v1s, because they did tests where they put football players on lasers, and they asked them to sprint individually. They then asked them to race against each other, and then they asked them to race against each other with the ball at the other end. And every single footballer player ran fastest when they were chasing the ball. So if you want to work on sprint training, sprint fitness, then use a ball. If you want to work on endurance fitness, then play in bigger spaces. If you want to work on sharpness, play in smaller spaces. But that you cannot train fitness in isolation of awareness and decision making, look and decide. Otherwise, it's not relevant fitness anyway.
Juan via Facebook Messenger asked,
nutrition?
Yeah. Oh.
Nutrition, listen, I don't think we should ask. When you get to the professional level, you do have to be really, really careful about what you eat. But I think there has to be a balance. You don't want to ask kids to act like professionals. I think balance is the key to it.
Then they may not grow appropriately.
I think balance is the key.
Yeah, balance is the key there. Exactly, Coach. Jason via Facebook Messenger asks, if you could change one thing about the youth soccer system here locally, what would it be? That's a loaded question.
Yes. No, I've dipped my toe in the water of the youth soccer world here, and actually I've met with a few clubs. There's actually youth soccer coaches that have worked in Miami FC and helped me with the first team. And the biggest problem in Miami just in my opinion, I'm not going to try and change it, I'm just giving my opinion, is that there are too many clubs, and they are all operating independently. And what you see in South Florida, with the amount of talent here, should be a national powerhouse, and it isn't really. Yeah. I mean, if you go through how many players have gone on to play national team level football,
Josie Altidore, Alejandro Bedoya, there are only a few.
Yeah. And you think how many have come from California?
Yeah.
You think how many have come from Texas? This is a melting pot of people that love soccer here, and the problem here is that there are too many clubs. Some good, some. Listen, I don't know the way that the clubs run, but just simply the problem that there's too many clubs is that you don't get the best playing with the best on a daily basis, and you don't get the best playing against the best on a weekly basis. Because you've got to think that if you look at the quality of your teammate, it's actually more important than the quality of your opposition, because you're playing with your teammate and being challenged by your teammate on a daily basis. You only play the opposition once a week. So if you think that if you divide the week into 7 days, there's 1 day where you play against the opposition. There's 5 days where you play against your teammate with 1 day off. So the quality of your teammate is more important. There's too many clubs. The players in Miami are spread too far apart, and you don't get that competitiveness on a daily basis. Now, I know Inter Miami have come in and they have launched their academy. So maybe they will maybe try and help put some of those best players together and offer it for free, so that everybody can, because sometimes players can't afford to play on the select teams, and maybe that will help. Time will tell whether the clubs are going to allow all their players to go, because what you've got to think about, and this is the other problem as well in Miami, is if these players now go and if players leave one club and go to another, just speaking to directors of programs, the way they look at it is, if a team comes and takes 5 of your players, and those players are paying $2,000, then why, in any business in the world, and that's what youth soccer is to them, is a business, why would I just go and give $10,000 away? And that's the way the clubs look at it, because they don't look at it and say, well, I've got to pay for the lights, I've got to pay for my coaching staff, I've got to pay for the field maintenance. They don't think, oh well, they've got to still pay those bills. Yeah. So it's how that will go down. What time will tell. But it's a starting point if the best can play with the best on a daily basis.
Good segue to bring up Inter Miami. They'll be launching a DA, or are launching a DA up the road in Fort Lauderdale this year.
Yeah,
and that's
and one of my ex-teammates is actually not teammates. Javi Morales is one of the coaches who
you coached him
at Salt Lake. He's a great guy, So it's nice to see him coming to town.
Yeah, you coached him in Salt Lake, and one of the great players in that era of MLS. Brilliant player.
Yeah, brilliant player.
Absolutely.
And a great guy.
Which is great news for us in South Florida. Hopefully he's here for a while. But the Development Academy, the DA, do we plan on having a DA program here at Miami FC? And what is your general thought about the DA?
Look, that's a different strategy that they're taking. They're taking the strategy of, we need to develop players. We want the best players, and we want them to play in the Miami first team. They've said that they're not going to get involved in the rest of youth soccer. They only want a team in each age group on the boys' side, is what has been said, I think. So we've got a different approach to youth development. We want to provide opportunities for all levels of kids, irrelevant of the level of play. We want to take the mindset that just because you might not be as talented as one kid, why wouldn't you get access to the Miami FC family, the Miami FC way. So we want to have a more of an all-inclusive academy rather than a select academy.
What's your general thoughts about the DA? It may be useful for pro clubs to bring players through their system and teach a style of play, but
the DA's good. The DA's been a great step in the right direction. I think the ECNL on the girls' side as well, and now there's an ECNL on the boys' side. I think any opportunity to get the best playing against the best is a good thing for the development of players. And you know, listen, we are nowhere near it at the stage where we can start thinking about a DA program. We want to try and grow the academy before we be in a position, to do that. So the DA for me is one of the most important things to happen for the development of American players. I think it was something like, was it 19 out of the 21 or play, or however the ratio, I think there was 19 players that are in the U20 squad starting tomorrow that played at least 1 year in the DA in this country. So the DA is serving its purpose, and it's a real welcome addition.
Yeah, last question from me on this topic, and then we'll talk a little about Miami FC. The residency program in Bradenton shut down after 20 years. A lot of success initially with the DeMarcus Beasleys, the Gooches, the Landon Donovans of the world integrating into the national team. But then as time went on, it became a less effective tool to develop a national team caliber players and a national team style of play. So do you think the DA as a whole is probably a better formula?
I think the DA provides opportunities for more people. I think at residency at any one time there was maybe 40 kids. So if you think about the residency program's a great idea as well if it's done right. But if you were to put me in charge of US soccer and there was no money object. Well, how do you say that?
There's no
money was no object.
Money was no object, right? You had unlimited funds.
I would have 3 residency programs because it's too far for a kid from California to travel to Florida to stay. I would have an East Coast, a Central, and a West Coast residency program, and I would feed into that from the Academy League. The other thing that was a problem, having some experience of some kids that went to the residency program, was the social element. They were in dorms. They didn't get to live a normal life. And I think a lot of kids they got bored. And I think that if I was to do a residency program, I wouldn't have them in dorms on site. I would put them with host families so they could have a normal childhood as well as develop at soccer. So I think the residency program's a great idea. I just think with America being so big, it just needs to be done differently, because getting the best with the best on a daily basis can only be a good thing. However, the social environment I think was wrong, and I also think that just having one was wrong.
The host families tends to work. I took a trip to Gelsenkirchen a few years ago to Schalke's academy. And obviously you mentioned Weston McKinney earlier. He came through FC Dallas's academy but went there after. They had a residency program, but they placed all of their kids with host families.
Yeah, that's the way. And listen, the social element can't be underestimated. The social element of, because at the end of the day, look good, feel good, play good. If you don't feel good about yourself and you miss the family environment, you're never going to replicate your own family, but it's the best thing that you can have. And look, if you had regional residency programs, then you could go home for the weekend. If you didn't have a game, your mum and dad might be able to drive to see you for an hour. But when it's in Florida, and we've said that there's not many players in South Florida that have. And it was actually in Bradenton, wasn't it? So
it was in the state.
There's not that many players from Florida. There's a lot from Texas. There's a lot from California. You can't just drive there for the day,
right?
And the kids get bored and they lose out on that social that social element as well.
Yeah, in defense of the state, we've had a few other guys from other parts of the state, Grant Zusi, Dax McCarty, Eddie Johnson, but still nothing like Texas or California. So that's a very relevant point. Coach, as we transition to Miami FC, we're seated in front of the deck of trophies. 5 trophies there. We're off to a good start in the NPSL Sunshine Conference. 4 wins out of 5 matches, plus 23 goal difference. Really have come good in this last few weeks, the last 3 matches away from home in the league.
Yeah. Listen, we've played well. We've played well. I think probably our worst two games of the season were the first 2 games of the season. We won against Miami United 2-0 without really playing great. Then we lost the second game to them 2-0. Playing, we didn't. The energy was there, the commitment was there, but the ability to perform our tactical roles under pressure, it wasn't there yet. And I think that, if you take the next 3 games after that, we have played our style. You've been at most of them, Kartik. We've played our style of football from minute 1, regardless of the score, and it's been a joy to watch. Even the Opener Cup game, the first half in the Opener Cup was about as well as we can play until the finish. We gave away an unfortunate goal after half time, and it really seemed that, again, so early on in the season, we didn't have that the ability to play our style of football under pressure.
Goals change games. That's the old adage, and it did in that game.
It's more. It takes. There's a difference, and the easiest way I can explain it to you, and it's a little bit relevant to the youth development. It's if I was to put a plank of wood out that was a foot wide, and I was to raise it 3 feet off the ground, and I would say to you, Carter, right, it's 10 meters long. I want you to walk along that. You could walk along that without any fear.
Yeah,
you wouldn't be thinking about your technique. It'd be a subconscious action to walk across that plank.
Yeah.
If I then rose that 100 feet in the air, and I've now added pressure, and I now tell you, Kartik, I want you to walk across that, then you're going to be self-conscious.
Yeah.
You're going to be thinking about every foot that you put down on that board. You're going to be thinking about everything. And that is the same as playing a high-risk, possession-based style of football under pressure. If I then put you up there 100 times, Kartik, and you've done it 100 times, then you can walk across it just like it was a foot high. But what we've got to do in football is we've got to get to a level where the complexity of football can be performed with your subconscious rather than with your conscious. And I think that early on in the season, especially when you've put such a new team together, we had a 100% record in pre-season, Kartik. We beat
a couple USL teams, beat 2 USL teams. Yeah,
there's no pressure. So you go into pressurized situations. Now you're basically starting again, and now it's totally different being able to perform a role under pressure to what it is being able to perform a role under no pressure. And I think at the beginning of the season, with a new roster, they had to feel comfortable performing our type of football under pressure, and that's where we're at now. And it's enjoyable to go to training. We go to training now. I watch training, and I don't have to speak as much during training. Because what I've learned in my coaching career is that it takes time. And as a young coach, I maybe tried to change things when things didn't happen as quickly. What I've done here is I've gone, I don't care that it's not working today. I don't care if it doesn't work tomorrow. This is the DNA of Miami FC, and we're sticking to it. And having the confidence and the patience now and the experience in my coaching journey to be able to go, okay, we might have lost that game, but this is the DNA of Miami FC. We've got to keep our beliefs. We've got to keep playing that way. Has allowed us now to now be putting in dominant performances for 90 minutes. We've
learned last season, we had a group of players that was accustomed to playing in the NASL longer season, that these fixtures come thick and fast in NPSL. So we've got this weekend off, Memorial Day, but then every week we have a match after that, and then once we hit the postseason, we might have Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday. How is the team mentally preparing for that?
I think this team is very, very strong. We feel confident with any environment that we're put in. I believe in the players that they have really, really tough mentality. I've pushed these players really hard in pre-season and at the beginning of the season, and I'll continually push them hard. So if it's a Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, these players have the mental strength to be able to compete and to find a way to be successful in that environment. What I would say is we've also rotated the squad so that if it is a Saturday, Wednesday or a short turnaround, then these players, everybody knows the role. So if somebody is fatigued, then it's the next man up approach, and every next man in this team has proved that they can perform the role well.
So, Coach, we have 4 home matches out of the final 5 matches in the league, starting June 1st against Storm. Coming after, kickoff is at 7 o'clock. Tickets, best deal in town, $25 season memberships that you can buy at MiamiFC.com, or you can call us. It's coming right after the Champions League final, so I have to ask you about that. Liverpool and Spurs.
Oh, Liverpool in it. Liverpool in it, Kartik?
Yeah, they were last season too.
Oh,
of course,
right, yeah. Oh, so again, yes.
Yeah.
I can't remember. It all blurs into one,
Yeah.
Kartik, No. Liverpool, what an unbelievable season. And when you actually look at what they've achieved this season, 97 points in the Champions League final, it's truly incredible. The most amount of points that Liverpool teams ever had after 38 games. Yeah. Incredible. And if you look at the points difference between Liverpool and Tottenham, it's 26 points. That's the same difference that's between between Tottenham and Bournemouth. So there's a 26-point difference in the level of the teams. So it just shows you that the dominance that this Liverpool team's had, and obviously the Man City team's had. So this is the first time, I would say, that Liverpool are going into a Champions League final. 05,
7,
06,
yeah,
07, sorry.
Yeah, against Milan.
And then the last year as favourites.
Yeah, they've been underdogs in all of those.
Yeah, and so Liverpool should win, just like AC Milan should have won in 2005. So it's going to be a different situation for this Liverpool squad going into the game as favourites and clear favourites. So, but the one thing that I would say is just having kind of watched quite closely. Jurgen Klopp's just such a fantastic manager,
yeah.
And the mentality that the team seems to have in the title running of, we'll just win again. I mean, they seem to be the most pressure-resistant team.
Along after the 80th minute,
they just seem to be able to play under pressure, and their actions, just like what we spoke about earlier, are subconscious. So I fully expect Liverpool to win. However, anything can happen in a final. One referee decision, one error from a player,
sending off.
So anything can happen in a final, but I fully expect Liverpool to be composed and to win the game.
Great. So thank you, Coach. We'll be playing again at home June 1st against Storm FC at Barry University. 4 matches in the next 5 weeks at home. Your season membership is $25. It's the best deal in town. Great football, great ambiance at Barry University, and we've got a pretty good team this year, Coach. So looking forward to that.
Just a shame about the coach.
Coach will be in a good mood the night of June 1st after Liverpool wins the Champions League and lifts the trophy.
Especially if they win. I might be drunk by the time the game kicks off.
So look for that. In any event, thank you once again for joining us.
I think I can put Corona in the water bottles if they win.
For the coaches, yes, not for the players.
Right. Well, maybe they get mixed up, and it's all right.
So I think we have 1 or 2 Spurs fans on this squad.
Listen,
got a few in the building here too.
You can't have everything, can you, Kartik?
No.
You know what I mean? But they shouldn't drink anyway. The Spurs fans shouldn't drink. You shouldn't drink on an empty head.
On that note, thank you once again for joining us. For Coach Paul Dalglish, I'm Kartik Krishnaiyer. We will see you again soon on the Miami FC Broadcast Network.